Good afternoon everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Moving to the Cloud versus Local Infrastructure. My name is Olivier Menel and I am the Events and Communications Officer at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. This webinar will be presented by Matt Wharton, who is Senior IT Consultant at InfoExchange. Matt's presentation is being recorded and a link to the recording will be sent to you all shortly, and you'll then be able to access it at any time on our website. If you have any technical issue during the webinar, please type it in the question box on your webinar panel and I will do my best to help you with it. If you have any questions, please also type them in a question box and Matt will answer them during two sessions, one about halfway through the webinar and the other one at the end. Now, Matt is very popular and once again we have quite a large number of people registering to this webinar, so he may not be able to answer all your questions, but if your question is not answered to today, Matt will answer to them later on via email. And that's all from me. I'll now hand over to Matt. Thank you.
This webinar about moving to the cloud or local infrastructure. So welcome, and it's a sort of an interesting topic that's been simmering over the last 10-20 years since cloud or hosted IT services are becoming more and more popular, and local infrastructure is becoming, potentially less suitable for a lot of not-for-profits. So today we'll explore both of those options and hopefully give you a sense of what's right for your organisation, because I think, as we'll talk about today, essentially there isn't one answer, and so the short answer is whether you should move to the cloud or use local infrastructure. The short answer is it depends, and each organisation is different, and hopefully today we'll give you a bit of structure around how to make that decision for your organisation. So as you can see on that slide there, we're a not-for-profit organisation and we work with a whole range of organisations, purely not-for-profits, and we do both cloud and infrastructure. So I'm not here to promote one or the other. It's really just to give you an independent view of what works better for your type of organisations. And of all those organisations there's small ones, there's large ones, and all of them has some sort of use of cloud and local infrastructure. So today, really what we're going to discuss is how to understand your requirements for technology and some of the things you should think about, some of the trends and what other organisations are doing in this space. I'll give you a bit of an overview of cloud-based systems, and for those of you who don't know about what's this cloud mean, I'll explain that a little bit. I'll also talk a bit about local infrastructure and when that's suitable and what that's good for, and then talk a bit about PCs, mobile devices and internet. So look, we will cover quite a few things. I'll try and make it relevant for the specific for not-for-profits, because that's who we work with and that's who you are. So hopefully at the end of the day you'll be able to have a bit more information to make a decision about developing your IT plan and your infrastructure plan for your organisation. So before we even get into details about is cloud best or is local infrastructure best, the first question you should really ask yourself is, what do I need technology for in your organisation? So it is different for everyone. Again, I've got some examples there on the slide around what organisations could use. Look, you won't need all of these. And some of you may be in unique areas of program delivery that may need additional ones, but these are some typical things that you will need either a cloud-based application or local infrastructure for. So obviously there's the standard ones like finance and HR systems, donation management, document management, emails and all those sort of things. And then there's look, I won't read out all of them, but then there's obviously more the hardware and devices. So you're still going to need PCs and mobile devices and phones. You need access to the internet typically, and a lot of you need that client management system as well. So you need to store client data somewhere. External communications, a lot of you will still need websites and a social media presence. A lot of you still send emails and communicate with your members in some way, shape or form. You obviously need to communicate with your staff in some way. So that can range from a full-blown rostering, time and attendance system and intranet to just some basic collaboration tools or video conferencing and messaging there. And then obviously there's the risk. So organisations that are more risk averse will need more infrastructure to manage that risk, higher grade firewalls and security appliances, and whereas others can get away with some more basic infrastructure for that. Your backup and disaster recovery, obviously, again, that will change depending on your level of risk and what information you're storing and how suitable it is for you to be down for an hour or a day. So these are all the things, not all the things, but some things that you should think about before you go down the path of working out whether cloud is best or local infrastructure is best. Because really, this will help guide how your infrastructure should be designed. Essentially, the first place always to start is, what do I need? And more importantly, in the future, what will I need? So not just now. Yes, you need emails now, but in 5 years, what are you going to need from a client management system point of view with the NDIS coming in? So maybe you need a new client management system and you can't get away with an Access database or storing documents on each client anymore. Or maybe internet connectivity, maybe ADSL, you're on ADSL with 5 users, but if you're about to grow to 30 users, maybe you need to look at upgrading your internet and telephony services. So the same with internal communication, rostering and timesheets with NDIS and other funding and more accountability nowadays. You might need a more sophisticated system for tracking that as opposed to just Excel spreadsheets. So obviously the more you need, the more you need to go and choose the right platform and the right system to give you that functionality. So considering all of these requirements, what we're seeing in the not-for-profit sector is a change really from what we saw 10 years ago when everyone was essentially going out, getting some capital expenditure, buying a server, putting your files on it, installing applications or databases, and then everyone working from the office to access that server. So there's been a really significant increase in systems, like a client management system, being available online, and in some cases only available online. So a lot of the systems nowadays that you can choose, you don't have a server-based option. So that's pushed some of that. And then also things like Office 365 becoming free for not-for-profits have pushed other organisations to say, hey, there's this thing in the cloud that we can get for free. Why are we paying for it to be stored locally? So that really has been a trend that we're seeing with not-for-profits of all sizes moving to cloud-based. So what that's meant is that there's been a decrease in local infrastructure. So the amount of people actually buying servers now has significantly decreased, particularly for basic things like email and documents. We've also seen an increase in mobile devices. So just really having the ability to go out to a client site, whether you're delivering a disability service or you're a counsellor or whatever service you're providing, particularly if it's remote, being able to have an iPad that can access your client management system, that you can see all their details and history and log your case notes and all of that on site, means you don't have to then go back and translate your handwritten notes into a client management system when you get back to the office. So that's been a real growth. And really just the fact that everyone's got mobile devices now for their personal lives. So, there's millions and millions of iPhones are across Australia nowadays. So everyone's got one and they know how to use them. So they want to access their emails on their smartphones nowadays. They don't see the sense of having to wait till you get to the PC at work to actually access that. And obviously with all of this means increased reliance on the internet. So there is a growing need for better quality internet. Now, we're still waiting on the NBN in most locations, but there is, particularly in metro areas, there is better access to higher quality connections. So most people are relying on the internet nowadays for most of their access to information. So there's some statistics that we've collected that give a sense of the not-for-profit sector in Australia and New Zealand. So really what this is saying is, you can see the colours there that differentiate between people who have moved, people who are planning on moving, people who are not planning on moving yet. So as you can see, there's 100% of very large organisations are planning to move in the next 3 years to cloud-based systems. And the rest are a combination of already moved and planning on it. And look, there are still many, particularly smaller, very small ones. 29% there still don't know, and that's often a lack of expertise and knowledge and time to think about these things. So most of those small, medium, don't have IT departments. And particularly those small and medium ones often don't have the expertise to make the informed decision about whether cloud is suitable or not. So often they can be barriers. So you can see the statistics down the bottom about what are the barriers for people moving. And often there is some costs moving, or their internet's not sufficient to move. Often it's just no time or lack of knowledge. Data security concerns, so there are still some misconceptions around the cloud and still some people that maybe can't move because of contractual requirements or they're not sure about whether the cloud is safe or not. And hopefully we'll resolve some of those misconceptions today as well. And often it is, there's only 8% there, but staff and vendor not knowing enough. So hopefully these type of webinars and the growth in cloud applications and the popularity will really help clarify what it means and when you should and when you shouldn't move. This is some more stats around what people are using and what applications and the type of PCs and what people are doing nowadays based on the survey. And as you can see with the middle one with the file sharing applications, 39% are using something like Dropbox and 20% on Office 365, 17% on Google Apps. So together that's quite a lot of and I know that doesn't add up to 100, but that is quite a large percentage of not-for-profits using online cloud-based file sharing applications. And the same with email. So you've still got 32% on an Exchange server, but you've got 19% on Exchange Online, 15% on Google Gmail, 7% on cloud email, 20% on internet service provider like BigPond and those sort of ones. So there is still a lot out there that are utilising cloud-based applications. So just going back a step and working out really what is the cloud. I know many of you will know this already, but essentially the cloud is nothing new, and I actually don't like the term the cloud. It seems very fluffy and unknown, and whereas most of these services, you actually know where they sit. So for example, Office 365 is in a data center in Sydney. So and that data center is known and you know where it is. So it's been happening for a long time. People have been hosting servers for a long time. So it's nothing new, but it's just a term that's been coined for a lot of these new applications that are now coming available online. So really, the cloud is characterized by these four things. So really it's about reliability. So for example, most cloud providers, Microsoft for example, have service level agreements. So 99.9% availability is, for Office 365 for example, is what Microsoft guarantee it will be available to you. And for many of you that pay, they'll give you a refund if they're actually not available for that period. So they have a commitment to be able to do that. Whereas if you're hosting an Exchange server or a file server on your local server environment, then it's not as reliable. You need to do the maintenance. You need to make sure it's available. If it goes down the middle of the night, yeah, that will obviously affect the availability of that server when everyone comes in the morning. So cloud-based systems are typically a lot more reliable than basic server environments. The other thing that a lot of organisations we've been working with have really found valuable is the expandability. So we had one organisation recently who we moved to Office 365, and then 6 months later they merged with another organisation and wanted to double the amount of users, so going from 250 to 500 users on their email environment. And if they were using a server for that, they probably would need to go off and buy another server or additional storage and an extra 250 licenses. Whereas in the Office 365 environment, all they needed to do was click a couple of buttons that said, give me 250 new free licenses, and within 5 minutes they were able to create another 250 email accounts that then they could provide to these new staff from the merged organisations. So it really gives you that flexibility to be able to scale up and down. And that's the usage-based pricing. So instead of having to go out and buy $20,000 worth of servers, it's more of that pricing where it's more the monthly fee. So instead of a capital cost that you depreciate over 3 or 5 years, it's just a monthly cost for those services that do have costs involved. And obviously, one of the most valuable things that most organisations are interested in for the cloud is that people can work from anywhere. People can work from home, people can work from remote locations on 3G or 4G. They can still get emails, and you can work from your office as well, obviously. So there's a bit of flexibility there, and as you can see, I've just put in a few sample systems about cloud-based systems, but there are thousands of systems out there, and there's no limit to what type of service you get from a cloud-based system. So there's the common ones like Gmail for emails, Dropbox for documents, MyOb for finance systems, but things like Amazon and Azure there, you can basically run up a server and install whatever you want on it. So essentially, anything you can run on a server, in most cases, you can run on a cloud-based server or a cloud-based hosted environment. So just wanting to clarify that, and yeah, really just give you a sense of what the cloud is. So a lot of organisations, these are the main reasons people have been moving to the cloud and how they've been justifying the move to the cloud. So many of you, I can imagine, will now have to go and report back to your organisations or your boards or your managers to really say, hey, I think we should move to the cloud or whatever the solution is, and this is why. And in many cases, you would do it to save costs. So we've had some organisations that have essentially paid for a whole new system by just reducing some travel time. So by having a free video conferencing solution based in the cloud means you can reduce driving and flying around the country. So any money that you would have spent on driving and flying for that month, you can actually put into implementing a new system. And particularly for those who are about to upgrade a server, or your server's got a year on, it's a good time to assess whether whether you need a server and whether you should pay that 5, 10 grand to buy the new server, or whether you should invest in cloud systems as well. The other reasons are defending against failure, as we said before about the 99.9% guarantee for a lot of these systems. You're really just protecting your data a bit more and reducing those risks. Collaboration, so there's a lot more tools nowadays that allow you to work on documents together and use discussion boards and store documents centrally so you can access them from anywhere, and creating that single source of truth. So if you have a cloud-based client management system and someone puts in case notes from while they're out on site, you can access that instantaneously from the head office as well. So it really is around creating that single source of truth and that one spot where all your information lives that you can access from anywhere. So when you're considering the cloud, again, we'll get to infrastructure in a minute about why do you also need infrastructure and when is the cloud not suitable. So these are some of the things to consider when moving to the cloud. So security and what information you're willing to store with an overseas or Australian cloud provider. So as you saw in the survey results before, there are still some people concerned about data security. So just to clarify a couple of things, for most of these providers, you can request knowledge about where they're storing your data and what things they have in place to protect your data. So, for example, Office 365, again, now is based in Australia, whereas Google is still based overseas. So when you're choosing your cloud providers or whether you are going to move, just do a bit of research on where is that data stored and what certifications they have, what processes. So again, Office 365 and Microsoft, they have a whole site that you can log on to see all the things they're doing to make sure the data is secure and all their privacy policies and all of that. So each organisation's responsibility to do their due diligence about that, but I will say that many large organisations, Queensland Police, for example, are storing a lot of their information on cloud-based systems. So it's also important to look at your contracts. So we work with some organisations in Victoria that have a hidden, not a hidden, but a fine print that says some of their client data must be kept in Victoria. So that's a reason for some clients to, again, choose a particular provider or store it locally until they can find a good Victorian-based provider. So really, that's a very small minority of organisations have those sort of clauses in their funding agreements, but it is worth, again, doing your due diligence. The other thing to consider is, and we'll get to this later as well, but you don't have to move everything all at once necessarily. So it might be that for some of you, you just, your emails, for example, first, because your Exchange server is about to be unsupported because it's 5 years old and you need to replace it. So maybe move that, but if you want to keep storing your documents locally or keep hosting your application locally, that's fine. Do it in a staged approach. So it's really about working out where the value is and the things that provide you the biggest benefit. So again, if you're about to upgrade your client management system, really consider whether cloud-based is suitable as well, and that may be good timing to move your client management system to the cloud. And while you're moving that, maybe there's some other things you can move as well. So really the client information is an important one, and documents, because really you don't want to create duplication, which we see a lot. So you don't want to have some information in the client management system and then the same information again on a local document repository. So it's really about assessing what is the most suitable location for all of that data. You also want to make sure that you have a backup if your internet goes down. I know many of our clients are still having connectivity issues. Some of them are still on ADSL, and some of them we've heard, we've seen Telstra in the news go down a few times recently. So you need a backup plan to say many of these cloud-based systems, they do have the ability to have offline copies, and there are other ways to have backups to your internet connection. So whether that's you've got some 4G dongles lying around that you use as a backup, or you tether off your mobile phones, or you go to another location like a library or a McDonald's if you have to work in the short term while your internet issues are being resolved. So as long as you've got a backup plan, then the cloud can be suitable. The other thing is most of the organisations we're working with have a hybrid scenario. So they have some local infrastructure and some cloud. So it might be that, yeah, you have a server for some things and cloud for other things. So I might just pause for a minute before I start talking about local infrastructure and mobile devices and internet connectivity. I might just pause for a minute, Ollie, and open it up for questions, and then I'll also leave 5-10 minutes at the end. But yeah, maybe if we pause for some 5-minute questions to give everyone a break and answer any questions about the cloud.
Thank you, Matt. We don't have any question at the moment. I'll just leave you about 30 seconds. If you've got a question, please type it in the question box.
Again, I can just save some more time at the end. That's fine.
I've got a question just coming through from Ian. Is there a minimum recommended speed for the internet for upload and download if you were to host your files on the cloud?
Yeah, I might come back to that. I've got a slide on that in a few minutes. So if you don't mind, Ian, I'll get to that in a minute, and if I still haven't answered your question, we can ask it again at the end.
Okay, we've got a few more. There's one from Emily. Is there a cloud membership management system that you can recommend?
Yeah, there are lots of different systems in the cloud, and even within categories like CRMs or member management or client management, there are lots of different types of systems. So when you say member management, some member management systems do 5 things, some member management systems do 100 things. So really what we'd recommend is undertaking a process of gathering requirements and then going through a process of doing some research on what's out there. I might even answer that offline. I think that's probably that one sounds very specific, and we probably need a bit more information before I recommend any specific solutions. So I might come back to that offline if you don't mind.
No problem. Do you find, that's from Michelle, do you find that some companies are more reliable than others, like for example Google against Microsoft?
Yeah, that's right, and it's questions about reliability, which is the service level availability. So most of these companies actually publish their availability. So Microsoft, I think last month for Office 365 was 99.95. I'm not sure what Google's was recently, and there's also some are better at security and have better certifications than others. So look, we have clients that use both Google and 365, but typically at the moment we generally recommend Microsoft 365, particularly because it's Australia-based as well, as an example.
Okay, one last question and then I'll let you keep going. What would be the minimum cost an NFP could expect to pay to migrate to the cloud?
Yeah, that's a very individual question as well, because it really depends what cloud system you're moving to and what you're moving from. So look, there are some free cloud systems that you can move to yourself. So the minimum cost would be zero, but I can't guarantee that any move is zero. So for example, there are a lot of online client management systems now that you need to go through a pretty complicated process to migrate your data from your existing system up to your old one. And again, that's a process we help organisations with Office 365 in particular, is getting the data out of your old email system and moving it to, say, Exchange Online with Office 365. So it really depends what system you're in and what you're moving to, and then the costs of that. So again, sorry if I'm not giving very specific exact answers for this, but I think that one's one offline where we can get into a bit more detail. But I suppose the short answer is you can move for zero for some basic systems, but for some complex systems, it can be an expensive and complex project. So somewhere in the middle.
Okay, thank you, Matt. If you'd like to keep going with the presentation, and we'll keep the other questions for the end.
Okay, thank you. And look, I think the questions highlighted as well that, look, there isn't, when we talk about the cloud, it's not one system. So when you talk about moving to 365, it's totally different from the process of moving to a client management system. So there isn't one answer for a lot of these things, and there isn't one solution that's going to work for all organisations. So it's really just a different type of way of working when you're moving to the cloud as opposed to local. So that's why some of the answers were a bit vague. So local infrastructure. So one of the questions I get asked all the time is, do I still need a server? Can I get rid of my server if I move to this cloud system or that cloud system? And again, it really depends on your requirements, and we'll talk through that now. And when you're talking about local server infrastructure, it really depends which type of infrastructure you're referring to. So a lot of the time we talk about servers as, yes, I've got a file server, I've got an email server, that's what I want to get rid of. But there are a lot of other things that you may need or you could have locally as well, which you may still need. So when we say get rid of all your local infrastructure, you may still need a modem and a switch and a PABX, for example, but you may be able to get rid of your server. So this is a bit of just a basic summary of some of the things that you would have in a room in your office somewhere, or a rack preferably, but you may still need some of these things depending on your size and complexity and what you're storing locally. So sure, you'd all have modems and switches, particularly some of the larger ones would have firewalls. Some of the modems and routers can do some firewall functions, but again, it depends what you're storing locally, whether you need a firewall or not. Server is the key one that we typically, organisations want to get rid of, because again, you've got to license it, you've got to maintain it, you've got to manage it on an ongoing basis and make sure it's secure. So that most organisations are doing things like hosting client management systems or storing databases. Most of you have files, so your document management, emails, user accounts, so being able to manage your users, so Active Directory, and managing your PC, so be able to pushing updates out and those sort of things is why people may need a server and what you're needing a server for. Some smaller organisations actually are replacing their servers with NASs, so storage devices where if you don't need the complex functionality of a server, all you need is to store a few files. then a NAS could be suitable, or some organizations use them for backups. If you've got a server, you probably also need a UPS to protect against surges and if the power goes out. If you've got a server, you probably need a tape drive or some way of getting your data off the server and backing it up and then taking it off-site preferably. Patch panel everyone's got, and PIBX is an example of a phone system. So again, a lot of organizations are moving to VoIP, which reduces the amount of infrastructure you need locally, but you still need probably some sort of box on the wall to manage your telephony, depending on what system you go with. So when we talk about local infrastructure, these are the type of things we're talking about. And some organizations are lucky enough to get rid of most of these, but many will still require a lot of these. So when we're comparing the two, so we've already talked about the cloud a lot. So it's monthly costs, it's reliant on the internet, someone else hosts it, and it gets updated on a monthly basis or a regular basis, and the costs are combined. And ideally, you'd have some local copies in case the internet goes down. Whereas a server or local infrastructure is more about, it's something you buy as a once-off, maybe anywhere between $2,000 and $20,000. You buy as a once-off server, you capitalize that over 3 to 5 years, and it's an upfront cost that you need to go to your board to justify and they approve. It's reliant on your local network, so in many cases you need to be on site and you need to have a good local network and cabling to access that. And in many cases you might need some remote software like Citrix or Terminal Services or Remote Desktop to be able to log into that from external networks because it is all stored locally. You need to provide ongoing maintenance. So that server is probably installed with Windows Server 2012 or R2 or something like that, which needs updates on a regular basis. And then every few years you probably need to upgrade the version. So you need to reinstall that. So you do need to purchase the software as well as the licenses. So if you've got a server with 50 users, you need to buy a CAL license for each one of those users. So you're buying a server for $3,000, then you might pay a few $100s for a Windows Server 2012, and then you pay $8 per user or whatever it is for the Windows Server software. And then if you need Exchange or SQL or any of those other applications, then you buy them as well and buy licenses for them. So it's different from the cloud-based model. And then you need to worry about your backups. So then you need to make sure that you've got whatever information is on that server is also backed up and off-site and tested. So they're all the things that you need to think about and the differences between local and cloud. So in many cases we do recommend that a lot of our clients still keep a server for some of these reasons. So if you're an organization that has an application, so in disability space, CareLink Plus, for example, is a popular client management system that can only be installed on a server. So if you want to use CareLink Plus, you need a server. And many people with custom access databases and those sort of things, they don't necessarily store very well on some cloud-based applications. So if you've got a really custom application that requires a specific server, then that may be a reason to keep a server until you're ready to move to a cloud-based client management system, which isn't a quick and easy process for many of you. So often it can take time. The other reason to keep a server is organizations that have really large files, videos, and images. So if you've got a really large video that you're wanting to share across your office, if you have that on the internet, you've got lots of different people accessing that on YouTube, for example, and using up all your bandwidth accessing videos. Whereas if you've got it locally, it doesn't actually use your internet bandwidth for that. So depending on organisations with large marketing departments or a lot of videos and images, sometimes it makes more sense to store those locally if you're going to access them all from local PCs, particularly if you've got poor or bad internet connectivity. So there are still many sites out there, and I feel sorry for some of our regional friends who, you know, a fibre connection, a 100 meg fibre connection that could cost you $300 a month in Melbourne. We got a quote recently that costs $3,000 a month in a regional area. So you still need to weigh up the benefits and the costs of this internet connectivity, and obviously NBN's on its way, but still might not solve all our problems. So there are, you know, you're still relying on the internet when you access cloud-based applications. So that may be a reason, if your site is particularly bad internet and you can't upgrade it, that may be a reason to keep a server for things like documents and other things. The other thing that medium-sized organisations actually need, particularly if you've got an office of, we usually say 20 PCs is a good benchmark, to help you manage your PC fleet. So if you want to run updates or manage each of those 20 PCs, if you've got a server, you can actually do that centrally and push things out and run updates. So if you want to update Adobe Reader, for example, across 20 PCs and you have a server, then you can do that on the server and push it out, and we'll update it all for you overnight. If you don't have a server, someone's probably going to have to go around to all 20 PCs and update that Adobe Reader on each of those. And that's why we say, look, if you've got under 20, it's probably just as efficient for someone to walk around and do it quickly. But if you've got over 20, it's going to take you a lot longer to do that. So often that's a tipping point why we say, actually, it's probably worth spending $3,000 on a server, and it will save you $5,000 in IT support over the next 3 years in doing those updates. The other thing that servers can do centrally is Active Directory. So being able to have the same username and password for your desktop, for your files, for your emails, for everything is really user-friendly and good for staff. So that's often another reason why you want to manage your users centrally in the one Active Directory. Now they're all things like Windows 10 and Azure Active Directory and Office 365 are starting to do that better, where you can have cloud-based sort of authentication where the usernames are the same across different applications. But if you don't have that and you have 10 different cloud applications that aren't connected, then each user's probably got 10 different passwords. So that's, again, something to think about, and from a usability point of view. And if you've got users moving between PCs and wanting roaming profiles, that's another reason to keep a server, because your server actually stores those favorites in the desktop and all of those and makes it available whatever PC you're on. So, some scenarios about what's suitable for what type of organisation. So, if you're a small organisation, and I did a cloud migration recently for a really small organisation, and it was a no-brainer that there was no way that organisation would need a server or should have a server or be able to maintain it and afford a server. So basically laptops, Office 365 or one of those sort of cloud-based applications, client management system paid on a monthly fee, MyOb Online, you know, payroll system, they don't need a server. And particularly because they're working from home and all over the place, it would have been difficult to set it up so that they could all access the server from all these locations. However, a medium size organisation with 50 staff, all in the one office, and they're all full-timers that work in the office all day, every day, look, it still makes sense to move some things where it's cost efficient to move email to the cloud, for example, because it's free, whereas they actually, it made more sense to have a local server for this organisation for file sharing, and they also had a client management system that needed a server. They manage their PCs and users centrally, and they stored all their large image and finance system. Now they did also use off-site backups. So instead of having tapes, they did push some of their backups to a cloud-based system. So again, they've got a hybrid model, pretty heavily reliant on that server or a couple of servers in that office, but still leveraging off a few cloud-based applications where it made sense. Whereas larger organizations across multiple offices actually made sense to put more of the applications in the cloud, email, and have a cloud-based intranet, cloud-based client management system, finance system, all of those. But again, they still need a server or a NAS locally to store some of those large files and management of PCs and all of those things. So again, 3 different types of organizations there and 3 different models. Now, many of you will fit into one of those categories, but most of you won't. So it's just making that assessment of really, what do I need a server for, and does it fit my organization? So the other thing that really impacts on your use of either cloud-based systems or server-based systems is what device is suitable for your organization and each staff member. So, for example, if you're very office-based and everyone's using desktops, again, that's more conducive to a server-based environment. Whereas if you're out and about on a laptop or Ultrabook, then you know, cloud-based is really good for that. Tablets, if you're doing a lot of work on tablets, again, probably a cloud-based client management system where you can take case notes and all sorts of things on tablets can actually really make sense and work quite well. Now, it's not saying you can't access servers through tablets or laptops, but usually a lot of these systems are creating good apps now for iPads and others that make it easier and more user-friendly to use these tablets and other mobile devices. So when you're buying these mobile devices, really it's about thinking, do I need 4G or are they just going to access from Wi-Fi? Do I need Android, Windows, or iOS? How am I going to manage these devices? That's another challenge that each IT manager is going to have. And how friendly are these client management systems? Do they actually have apps? Do they work on mobile devices? And what accessories do you need? So they're the hidden costs often. You've got to buy all these adapters and keyboards, and often that can be hundreds of dollars worth of accessories. And yeah, what are your policies around, is it your device or their device, and how they use it? So again, just a few things to think about around devices and how that impacts on cloud versus server. The other really important thing that someone mentioned before is, do I need to upgrade my internet? So this is again a question I get asked all the time is, what type of internet connection do I need to access the cloud? And again, the answer is it depends. It depends what you're accessing in the cloud. So if you're accessing your emails, look, and you're moving from an Exchange server to a cloud-based email server, the reliance on the internet is not going to change dramatically from what you're doing now. When you send an email now, it still goes over the internet, and you move to cloud-based, it still goes over the internet. And it's still the same size, essentially. However, if you're now going to start using it for video conferencing and you want really high-level, high-quality video where you're going to have 10 people in your office doing concurrent video conferencing, again, that's going to put a really big dent in your internet connection and require more than an ADSL type connection. So just to clarify, there's still some confusion about what type of internet that are out there. So again, dial-up, no one should be using. 3G, 4G, a lot of people will be using on their mobile phones. And again, I tether off my phone occasionally to use my laptop, but typically that's not necessarily a business grade option. ADSL again is for either very small organisations or individuals. ADSL2 again, a lot of our clients are still relying on ADSL, but the big issue with ADSL is the upload speed is under 1 meg. So that's a 0.9 meg there in that scenario, which means it can be poor performance in things like video conferencing or uploading things to intranets and document sharing. So that's where we often, medium-sized organisations are starting to more and more move to connections like Ethernet, which means you get 20 meg or 10 or 20, or you can choose the number or with your provider, but 20 meg each way, 20 meg upload and 20 meg download. So that's where you are almost guaranteed, depending on your agreement with your provider, but you can be guaranteed sort of standard speeds, whereas ADSL it's typically more your best effort. But more and more organisations, if you've got 100 people in one office, again you're more and more suitable to a fibre business grade connection where you're looking up to more 100 meg. NBN's an interesting one. NBN's really the infrastructure that the government are putting in, and it's going to be different at every location. And then the providers that offer the plans on top of that infrastructure are going to be quite different as well. So some providers may be offering just ADSL type plans on top of NBN. So don't assume that NBN is going to solve all your problems. It might mean that you get upgraded infrastructure to your location, but then you've got the decision about what plan and what provider to go with. So again, here are some scenarios about what's suitable for what type of organisation. So again, going from the top, you might get away with ADSL2 if you're just a single user at home or a group of under 10 people. Whereas if you're using, you've got 10 people trying to do video conferencing and lots of cloud applications, you're going to start to struggle. If you've got 30 staff across multiple locations, again, that's where you need to look at those symmetrical connections where you've got 10 or 20 meg up and down to be able to connect into another server or a cloud-based application. And if you've got over 50 staff, again, I'd explore whether it's a 20 meg Ethernet or fibre as well. So look, again, there's no one answer for every organisation, but it is something that each person needs to assess for each location, because even if one of your offices has really good internet connection and you can get a cheap, really good high quality connection, there's no guarantee that the other office 5 k's away is actually going to get a good connection as well. So partly it's about finding a good provider that can provide you that is in a cost-effective way. So that leads on to really my tips for, and we've only got sort of 5 minutes left, so sorry if I've rushed through any of that, but really when you're looking at your technology solution, whether it's cloud-based or local infrastructure-based, these are the top things that I recommend that you consider. So really it's look at where you're headed as an organisation. So and a future, in a future state for 5 years. So consider changing in funding, changing in growth. We have some organisations who say to me, oh look, in 5 years we're going to double in size. Well, that actually changes what solution I would recommend as opposed to if you were going to stay exactly the same for the next 5 years. And if your staff are going to be more and more out at clients, then again that changes the technology solution and potentially more cloud-based than if you had 50 people just sitting in one office all day every day. Or if you're going to let your staff work from home a lot, or if you're going to have other offices pop up in other states. So it's really around work out what services you're delivering and what your organisation will look like before you even think about what infrastructure you put in place. And then that will determine what applications you need. So look, if you're quite a large organisation, you might need a HR system and an OH&S system and a payroll and a finance and a email system and document management and an intranet and a whole suite of systems. Whereas if you're a small organisation, you might get away with, one system or some really basic paper, just some file storage or document management can do a lot of that for you. So you don't necessarily need a client management system if you've only got 5 clients. So that's again will heavily drive whether you need a server. So if you're saying, yep, I need a client management system that will help me prepare for the NDIS, oh look, online there's plenty out there that are cloud-based and they seem to suit my needs, then yeah, when I'm going out to choose one, I'll put cloud-based as a preference in my selection criteria, which means I won't need a server. Third one there is know how your staff need to work. Again, with NDIS or other funding changes where you're going to start to need to go out further to sites. So you're going to need to be in clients' homes or work from remote locations. That changes your infrastructure and again moves you more towards cloud-based infrastructure and mobile devices as opposed to a server and a desktop. The other tip, as I mentioned before, is really stage it and do what adds most value. So many of our clients, they've moved their email to Office 365, but they still have file servers because a lot of them are in the office and it makes sense for them with bad internet connections. And it's not urgent to move their documents across because it's meeting their needs. Whereas we have others who say, oh, look, my most urgent thing is my server's about to die, give me a solution and move me to the cloud. So it's really about staging it if you can. And the other one is, consider a hybrid model. So in many cases, I would say most of our clients actually have a bit of local infrastructure and the cloud. So even if that local infrastructure is a NAS or a really cheap server that does minimal things, sometimes it still makes sense to have that in addition to most of their applications being on the cloud. And it could be a staging thing as well to say, look, I'll have a server for the next 3 years, but after that, then I'll go full cloud. But really the last one there is get expert advice. Look, I would have loved to give you every answer you need within this 1-hour webinar, but really you need to look at finding someone. Now I know all of you can't afford IT staff, so it could be someone on the board that understands this, or one of your staff members, or find a partner, a technology partner that has some expertise that can give you some advice. But the other thing I would say is always get advice from more than one source. So you may speak to your local support provider and they may have a strong preference for infrastructure because that's what they know and that's what they make their money on. So don't just rely on one individual to give you advice. So don't just trust me, go and ask for a second opinion before you really head down a path. So look, they're my top tips. I've run out of time, and I said I'd leave some time for questions, so I will do that. Ollie, how about 5 minutes of questions?
Sure. If you've got any questions, please fire away, write them in your question box. Matt, you mentioned that users moving regularly between computers was a reason to keep a server.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was referring to roaming profiles. So if you, for example, in an office, you may want all your things that you save on the desktop and anything that's local to you to move between PCs. So things like your favorites and your desktop, that requires a server to do that. However, if you don't need to store anything on your desktop and you don't need anything locally and you've got all your information you need stored in cloud-based applications, then it doesn't matter what device you work from. But a lot of people are still storing links on desktops and favorites and other things that you may still want to have as roaming profile.
Yeah, that was a question from Michelle because they've had issues with hard drive space because of users hot desking. And so it's been recommended to them that they ask their users to log in remotely.
Yeah, and remote access is a bit of a whole different discussion around Citrix or remote desktop or terminal services, but I suppose a new way of working is really that all the information that you're storing, whether it's your documents in a SharePoint or OneDrive in Office 365 or your emails in Gmail or your client information in a client management system, is all cloud-based. So you're actually not, you're relying less and less on each PC, and you're relying more and more on accessing these things from the cloud. So it doesn't actually matter. All you need is a web browser and you can access all your information. So you're relying less and less on that hard drive storage or any of those servers. But look, it is often a change management issue where users don't want to change exactly what they're doing overnight, and they still like saving stuff on the desktop, for example. So.
Thanks, Matt. We've got a couple of questions that basically ask for the same information. If you're using the cloud, wireless or wire internet?
If possible, I would always recommend cables. Things always run quicker on cables and more reliable on cables, particularly if it's a Cat 5 or Cat 6, you know, those blue cables you have in your office is always the preference. If you're doing wireless, again, it depends on the quality of your router, it depends on the location of your router, it depends on what device you're using. So there are a lot of variables, but where you can, I would always plug in.
Okay, we've got a question from Martin. I'm hoping I get it right. So when you work on the cloud, you can access documents on the cloud with nothing on your local disk, or files can be on your local disk and mirrored in the cloud. How does one refer to the system where things are on the disk and mirrored in the cloud, and make sure that the latest version is always both on the cloud and on the different computers?
Sure, and I think what this is referring to, and I'll give an example of, again, Office 365. Now, sorry if I keep using that as an example, but that's a very common one that everyone's using nowadays. So in that case, you can edit a document using, in Office 365, there's a product called Word Online. So you can write a Word document and it is online, anyone can access it from anywhere, and you don't even need to save it because it's always just online and it's always up to date to the millisecond. So you don't need anything installed on your computer for that, but you do need to be on the internet, obviously, to get this Word on. Now, if you also have Word installed on your computer, which is part of Office, and you open up a document that's stored in your OneDrive in Office 365 and you open it up in Word, when you click Save, it saves it back to Office 365 or OneDrive or SharePoint or wherever that is stored in that Office 365 environment. So the second you click Save or autosave, it automatically updates the cloud-based version. So if you've got someone else looking at that, they will see whatever version it is that whenever you save last. There is also a cool tool that I use a lot called co-authoring, which means you can do this in Word Online or Word, is you can work on one document together in Word, for example, and you can see every time you save in Word, you can see each other's changes and you can basically work on it together. So look, each document management system is different, but using Word as an example, there's some really good tools, and again, that's free, that not-for-profits have access to, and it's just a different way of working.
Thank you, Matt. Maybe one last question. So from Nicholas, for example, when you determine your needs in the future, so when you look for information on what to consider, where do you suggest not-for-profits should look for information to do that?
Yeah, we've actually been working on a platform, and I haven't advertised it on this, but a platform called ImproveIT.org is actually a platform that InfoExchange have developed with other organisations like NDS and ACOS and Connecting Up, where we're trying to put as much free resources for not-for-profits, templates and tools to be able to help them with their IT. So again, just a free repository of information that can give you tips and tricks around moving to the cloud, or which system to choose, or developing an IT plan, or gathering requirements for a client management system. So that would be a good place to start. And as I said in the previous slide, it may be that you need a partner. It's not always saying you can't do things yourself. I encourage you to try and do as much as you can yourself and save your money on consultants, but I would always get some advice from someone. And again, I'm happy for anyone to contact me directly, happy to give a bit of free advice every now and again, or see if there's any other way we can help. So my email address is on there, and Ollie will send it as well. If you're not sure, or if you're about to go down a path and just want to run something by someone, let us know.
Right, thanks, Matt. Is there anything you would like to add before we wrap it up?
Not really, just look, as I said, feel free to contact me anytime. I hope it's been helpful. It isn't an easy decision. It isn't a clear-cut decision. It is something that is individual to each organisation, but what I will say is there are a lot of people moving to cloud-based applications, and they're becoming easier and more popular and cheaper. So I would, before you go out and spend a lot of money on infrastructure, I'd really consider it heavily. But yeah, don't assume there's one easy solution. I expect for many of you it will be a bit of a hybrid model, a bit of a staged model, and consider change management. Don't just change everything overnight and expect your users to be happy with that and be able to work with that. So thank you. Hopefully I've given you some ideas and some tips around how you can design your technology.
Well, thank you very much for presenting, Matt, and thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar. I also hope you have learned a lot from it. As mentioned earlier, we will send you a link to the recording of today's webinar and a copy of the slides shortly. If you have any questions that come to your mind later on, please feel free to send them through to me at events@connectingup.org, and I'll forward them to Matt, or you can email Matt directly. His address is still on the screen. And that is the end of this webinar. Thanks again for joining, and please enjoy the rest of your day.